In this pod-slice summary of the Triggernometry podcast, Konstantin Kisin talks with the esteemed TV host and comedian Jay Leno. They delve into Leno's humble beginnings in small-town Andover, Massachusetts, his tricky leap into the cutthroat world of showbiz, and his undying passion for comedy. As a young boy, he was enamored by comedic icons like George Carlin and Richard Pryor, who revolutionized the art by replacing war and Depression-era humor with contemporary, relatable content that resonated deeply with Leno. Leno describes how his journey began by imitating George Carlin's class clown routine and tossing in bits of his own experiences growing up. His big break came when he started performing at a jazz club in Boston, where he got a captive, appreciative audience for the very first time, a pivot point in his comedy career. Leno reflects, "I never had an audience that listened before." Interaction with Richard Pryor left an indelible mark on Leno's humor style. Pryor, despite his mood swings and drug addiction, was an extraordinarily talented comedian who moved away from the mainstream set-up punchline format and narrated interactive, hilarious stories introducing unforgettable characters. Pryor was the first to introduce profanity in his jokes, which was initially frowned upon, but later became widely accepted as it added authenticity to his routines. Looking back on his rookie days at strip clubs and small-time joints, Leno admits that the heckling and disinterest from audiences wasn't disheartening. Instead, it encouraged him to keep going. Leno shares a unique approach for him to get on stage. He would bet the bartenders $1.50 that his act would fill the bar. Leno's strategy was a double-edged sword. It cost him a fair amount, but it was successful in helping him secure gigs, gain exposure, and refine his performance. Moving to Los Angeles marked a pivotal point in his career with exposure to some of the best comics of the time, like Robin Williams, Jerry Seinfeld, and David Letterman. This experience was both intimidating and inspiring, pushing Leno to work on his comedic finesse. In his unique yet relatable storytelling style, Leno lightens the complexities of his journey, highlighting his initial struggles and the continuous hard work that went into refining his comedic skills. His shared experiences provide a genuine insight into the comedy world's realities and the grit required to establish oneself in the industry. The podcast moves on to delve deeper into Jay Leno's comic journey, emphasizing the tenacious spirit that led him to the stage despite numerous hurdles. Leno points out an interesting aspect, his low self-esteem, which he believes was the key to his success. Leno's hallmark Modesty shines through as he recounts his dyslexic struggle as a student and how finding humor and connecting with people became his beacon. The assertion runs contrary to the popular belief that high self-esteem is critical for success. For Leno, Modesty was a catalyst for active listening, positive engagements, and continuous refinement. Leno showcases his gift of storytelling by bringing in some truly surreal anecdotes from his experiences working in odd places. He mentions the notorious incident at a Massachusetts club where Bouncer Billy physically attacked an audience member, disrupting Leno's performance. From the safety of the current day, he looks back at these wild times with a sense of humor. Leno then delves into his early time working with strippers, an experience he claims enhanced his ability to interact with diverse crowds and helped him develop a more engaging stage presence. As he explains, learning to handle unpredictable audiences is as crucial for a comic as the content itself. While exploring the unsavory side of his journey, Leno shares how he cleverly avoided complications with the mob by refusing their monetary favors. This decision saved him from potential harassment and legal trouble later on, a clear testament to Leno's instinctive wisdom in diffusing potentially dangerous situations. The conversation then navigates towards how Leno transitioned into TV. During the 70s and 80s, stand-up comedy was particularly popular on television, and comedians who could deliver tight sets of around 5 to 7 minutes were in high demand. Opportunities often came from fellow comedians, emphasizing the supportive camaraderie amongst comics. Leno remarks how this supportive network helped him and others secure appearances on shows, contradicting the stereotype of the industry being excessively competitive. Sharing anecdotes about Freddie Prinze and Charlie Sheen lead the discussion on managing fame. While fame led Prinze down a tragic path, Charlie Sheen's antics, though entertaining, couldn't tempt Leno to follow a similar course. Leno observes that hosting The Tonight Show provided him with a unique space wherein he could be around show business without getting engulfed by it. Jay Leno's journey, filled with striking anecdotes and lessons, depicts challenges and struggles as parts and parcels of a comedian's journey. His low self-esteem, coupled with an undying passion for storytelling, drew him to the stage and helped him navigate his journey successfully in an arena many fail to survive. As the narrative proceeds, one can't help but be intrigued by this odyssey and the man who embarked on it. The podcast continues with Leno discussing his aversion to drugs and alcohol, stating that their allure has never interested him. Instead, Leno shares his passion for cars, relating it back to his early days in New England, where he would fix up broken snowmobiles and abandoned cars. He acknowledges that working with his hands fostered a greater appreciation for the ease of his comedy career, offering a perspective many may lack in today's society. Leno advises young comedians to prioritize passion for the craft over monetary gain. He humorously notes that when working on The Tonight Show, he chose to continue receiving a lower paycheck, avoiding negotiations for a pay rise. Such a move ultimately secured his position as permanent guest host, as it made him a cost-effective choice compared to other comedians. Leno states that he believes talent will eventually lead to financial rewards, placing emphasis on the pure joy in doing the work itself. The conversation populates with Leno's insights about comedians who dislike interacting with people, a trait he finds perplexing and counteractive to the essence of comedy. He contrasts such behavior with his welcoming attitude towards fans who pay to see his shows, finding it disrespectful to overexploit them by selling merchandise. The podcast further explores Leno's inherent humility and gratitude for his career's success. He brings to light some practices that contributed to his success, such as hiring a dedicated crew for The Tonight Show and listening to their feedback even when it wasn't flattering. In shedding light on the pitfalls of fame, Leno glumly notes how many celebrities fall victim to drugs and promiscuity. He confesses that avoiding such paths was merely a matter of avoiding these tempting influences, suggesting that being self-deprecating and affable helped maintain his grounded perspective. Comedy for Leno emerges from interactions and experiences. Thus he prefers to travel alone, stating that solitude enables humorous occurrences that would not happen if everything was organized by an advanced team. This prompts a discussion about the unique humor found in various places, such as New England's quirky nature that generates offbeat compliments. A key takeaway from this episode continues to be Leno's humility and respect towards his craft. His comments highlight the importance of embracing one's job, interacting positively with others, and maintaining a grounded perspective despite fame. Even in recounting anecdotes and personal experiences, Leno's modest character and perseverance are constant themes throughout the discussion. Continuing their dialogue, Leno is keen to express the importance of having the ability to decipher an audience's mood and react accordingly, comparing the role of a comedian to an orchestra conductor. He shares unique strategies, such as removing potentially controversial material that could be misinterpreted, thus retaining a harmonic environment. Leno also emphasizes an appreciation of diverse audiences, asserting that they prevent bias, leading to a more honest and dynamic performance. The analogy of an orchestra resurfaces, but this time as an analogy for such audiences. Leno talks about the fascinating dynamics that form when an audience involves a balanced mix of men and women, as well as ethnicities and ages. Further, Leno delights in comparing his experiences with various guests. He notes an admiration for politicians over actors due to the authenticity offered by the former. A memorable moment is shared when President Obama gave Leno his cell phone number during an early campaign visit, reflecting on how their bond unfolded from then on. Leno also recalls his encounters with late actor Sean Connery, lauding the actor's tough nature, hearty laugh, and jovial personality. Stories are shared of Connery's amusing antics while filming, instilling a comical and endearing sense of nostalgia in listeners. Leno later speaks of change, both in the industry and the world, remarking that while the industry's environment has significantly transformed since his early career, it's a part of progressive change. As they segue into the topic of intrusive media, Leno confidently sides with the notion that openness has now embedded itself into our everyday lives, which is not necessarily a bad thing. In his perspective, this transparency has leveled the playing field between the elites and the common folk. In summation, this portion of the podcast illuminates Leno's charismatic and observational mind, delving into tales of his interactions with notable figures, his perspective on treating audiences, and the evolution he's witnessed in the industry and society. His insights tie back to his overarching emphasis on authenticity, respect, and understanding, providing an enriching perspective from a seasoned professional. In this part of the discussion, Leno begins by examining the evolution of comedic content over time, specifically the shift in humor dynamics from broad, potentially offensive jokes to ones that are more sensitive to diverse cultural nuances. Although acknowledging that this pendulum might sometimes swing too far, he suggests that this transformation is generally beneficial for a more inclusive approach to comedy. Discussing his experience with social media, Leno expresses his reluctance towards using these platforms due to the propensity for misunderstandings and misinterpretations of comedic intent. An anecdote about an interaction he had in a Chinese restaurant elucidates his perspective on the current social climate, revealing his struggles navigating the complex and often nuanced terrain of modern communication. As the conversation pivots towards the subject of comedians facing repercussions for controversial jokes, Leno expresses his observations on the disproportionate penalties between actual harmful actions and offensive joke content. He gives an example of Louis C.K., whose career suffered similarly to Harvey Weinstein's, despite the stark difference in the nature of their respective wrongdoings. The ongoing theme is the need for nuance in interpretations and reactions, contrasting the present black or white mentality towards incidents and remarks. Speaking about current late-night comedy shows, they note how these platforms are relying more on partisan commentary rather than focused humor. As the talk then veers towards future prospects, Jay expresses his fervor for his show's success on YouTube, stressing that a comedian is only as good as the last joke. From his perspective, purity in comedy, the joke itself is the staple of successful humor, not the comedian's personal views or sentiments, implying a declining interest in politicized and polarizing humor. Further along, they reminisce about Rodney Dangerfield's transformation as a comedian. Still, in line with the theme of authenticity, the duo note how Rodney's success came when his onstage material resonated with his inherent personality. The anecdote wraps up with a touching story about Rodney's late stages, illuminating Leno's fondness and admiration for him. In essence, this segment explores the balance between comedic subjectivity and societal sensitivity, the repercussions of controversial humor, the public's increasing interest in partisan commentary. Yet, it also underlines the importance of retaining a love for the art of comedy itself, a principle beautifully embodied in Rodney Dangerfield's career. Through Leno's reflections and anecdotes, listeners gain a deeper comprehension of these dynamics and the pressures that come with a profession in comedy. In a warm and humorous trip down memory lane, Kissin and Leno discuss the final, poignant moments of the great Rodney Dangerfield as he was slowly slipping away. Leno's anecdote about visiting the comedy legend in the hospital is both emotional and true to comedy form, as he recounts getting a final laugh out of Rodney in a way only a fellow comic could do. This story illustrates Leno's belief that comics, like Dangerfield, have an inherent and lifelong commitment to their craft. When asked an introspective question about what under-discussed topic people should be conversing about, Leno refrains from specifying any particular subject. Instead, he points out that it's not his call, perhaps underscoring the individual's freedom and responsibility to ponder critical issues personally. He expresses his disdain for TV shows where comedians play inquisitive reporters, stating that it's an easy shortcut to writing actual jokes. For Leno, there's nothing harder, and by implication more satisfying, than writing a joke. He hints that some comedians may use these platforms to avoid the strenuous task of joke writing and, in doing so, deprive the audience of their real talent. Leno communicates a clear preference for stand-up performances over talk show appearances for comedians, arguing that individuals aren't necessarily interesting in and of themselves. It's what they do or say, the comedy they create, that draws people's interest. This perspective reveals Leno's deep respect for comedy as a craft, as well as his dedication to the profession. A question from a supporter addressing France's apparent lack of driving skills lightens the mood, showcasing once again the variety in topics addressed during the course of this podcast episode. While the specific context of this query is not elaborated upon, it offers a playful diversion from the more profound discussions and signals a shift towards a more casual and interactive segment of the session. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.